Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to part 2 of this tutorial. Now, if you haven't watched part 1, of course, you have to go and watch that. We create a template of the project we want to create, which is a clone of Google Drive. Okay, so what you need in this episode is a server of some kind. So if you don't have a server of any kind, just download XAMPP. So you download XAMPP and then install it. Now, if you're using Macintosh, it's better you download MAMP. If you're using Linux, download LAMP. I'm using Windows, so XAMPP is fine. You can also use WAMP for Windows. Okay, so once you install XAMPP, whatever system you're using, open its control panel and make sure you start Apache and MySQL. MySQL is our database, Apache is our server. So we need both to be active. So start those two and we should be good to go. Okay, so we can minimize this now. All right, so once you're done with that, now we can grab the zip folder. There's a link in the description, or in the previous video you can find the link to this zip file. This is just the HTML templates we created. So I can do extract here. Now where I am is in drive C, XAMPP, htdocs, templates, my drive. So the reason I'm in C, XAMPP, htdocs is because this is the server folder for XAMPP. So if your server folder is different, you can go to, depending on the server you're using, you can go to that folder. You don't have to make the templates folder. That's just for me to organize my code properly. But you can create the My Drive folder within your template folder. So mine is in here. So what I'm going to do is copy the link to this guy, come to my browser and paste that link, and it shows me the index of that folder. Now I want to run everything through my my server, so I'm going to edit everything up to htdocs and replace that with the word localhost, like so. Now it shows me the index of that folder, but at least now you can see it says Apache, gives me the version, and it says PHP 8.1, so which means I'm running PHP and Apache, which is awesome because we're going to need both of these. So within this, I want to create an index page so that my server can load that instantly. So I'll need a text editor to create that file. I want to use the text editor instead of creating it directly. And my text editor is Sublime Text. So I'm going to load that. And within Sublime Text, I have my folder in there. So let me just remove it and add it again, just so you can see that process. So I'm going to drag and drop my drive into my text editor, which is Sublime Text. Now you can use any text editor, VS Code, Notepad++, that's all good. So in there, I'm going to right click, new file, and create a file called index.html and save. So let's save this file. Since it's an HTML file, Apache will notice it. If I refresh now, it will load that index file instead. Okay, so you see that, it means we are good to go. Our server is working, everything is working as intended. Now, in order to follow along, in case I haven't mentioned yet, you need to know at least some basics of JavaScript. Just the basics, like what is a function, what is a variable, what is a loop, and what is an if statement. If you know those things, then we are good to go. The same is with PHP. You have to know what a function, variable, loop, and if statement. If you know those, we are good to go. If you don't, I have videos in my playlists. Just check the channel for the playlists. There's HTML basics, JavaScript crash course, and the basics of PHP for absolute beginners. Once you have gone through those courses, you are ready to do this. Okay, so let me explain a little bit how JavaScript and PHP interact together. So let's imagine you're on the internet. This is your PC over here and your screen over there. So Why do we use JavaScript and PHP at the same time? So what's happening is, let's say you want to request a page on Facebook. So you make a request to Facebook. There's a Facebook server over here doing its thing, and then it's going to return a page to you in HTML format, because HTML is the language that your browser here will understand. It doesn't understand PHP or any other server-side language. So on the server here, there is a language. In our case, it's PHP. So there are many different languages, but for our sake, we're going to assume there's PHP here. So PHP, what PHP does is it will grab your request and then generate an HTML page from your request. So it says, okay, you want this. I'm going to create an HTML file for you and then send it back to you so you can view it, because that's what your browser understands. Okay, so plain and simple. But the problem is, once your document reaches the user side, so on your mobile device or on your computer, PHP has no effect on that page, because remember, PHP runs here on the server side, which is on the internet, not on your device, on your internet, on the internet, yes? So PHP, once it sends the request back, PHP is done. It's done its thing and it's generated the HTML it needed and it's done. So it's not carried over. So if, for example, I coded something in PHP and on the server, the user that is viewing the page will only see the result of that PHP and not the PHP itself. So the code is safe on the server here. No one will ever see it, because all they see is the result of running that code. Now a problem comes in, for example, let's say I want to change some part of the page. I'll need to make a new request to the server and then need to generate a new page and send it back. Now imagine I want to put a clock on my page. I want a ticking clock on my web page. I can't do that with this system here, because once I send the HTML page is sent to my browser here, it's a static page, meaning it doesn't change in any way. Whatever information I sent, whatever timestamp I sent there will remain static, because the page is static by nature, because the program that created that page is all the way on the server here. In order to update that clock, you need to make a new request or refresh the page, which is a new request, and then a new page comes in to show you the time, the new time now. And sometimes that's okay, sometimes not so sustainable. So instead, a new language was developed called JavaScript JS. So what happens is, when PHP is done and creates its HTML, sometimes the coder will add a bit of JavaScript as part of that HTML. Now your browser does recognize JavaScript. So once you send that information back, you receive that information. JavaScript begins to work once the code reaches your device, the user's device, right? This is where the JavaScript works. So JavaScript is meant to now take over where PHP has ended. So now JavaScript can manipulate anything on the page because it works within the browser. So you can now tell it, okay, update the time here, and it will do that. And it can manipulate anything on the page. Now, JavaScript has become very powerful over the years, to a point where instead of refreshing the page for you to get new information on your browser, you can actually use JavaScript to do this in the background in a separate process. It can make a request to the server, and PHP will run that request, create some new HTML, and then JavaScript will take it back without refreshing the page, and then it can choose which part of the page to edit with that new received information. So this is what we're going to learn to do. So in this manner, JavaScript can turn your static web page into an app of some kind, because the page, you can have one page and keep changing the contents of that page according to the new information that JavaScript has. And sometimes you don't even need new information from the server. For example, you can create things like a submenu, maybe update a clock like I had said. So this is how it works. So we're going to use a lot of JavaScript here because we want to be able to interact extensively with our page and have it respond using JavaScript. So because JavaScript runs on your on the user's device, it means anyone can look under the hood and see the JavaScript that is running your page. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. This is why you should never put any sensitive code in your JavaScript. All the sensitive code should be in your PHP side on the server to keep it safe. Like for example, you should never run queries directly from JavaScript because if somebody sees what queries you're running, then they know the structure of your database, for example. So that is not a good idea. So instead, you just put keywords here. For example, you can say a keyword like load table, and then JavaScript will send that keyword load table, and then PHP will understand what that is, and then it will actually generate a query here to load the table and then send back that result like that. Okay, so hopefully you understand the relationship between JavaScript and PHP in our case. So because PHP is on the server and our database will be on the server here, so PHP will be required to read from the database. So JavaScript will make a request to PHP, and the PHP will read from the database, send the data back to JavaScript, and then JavaScript will update your current page without refreshing it. Okay, great. So if that is understood, well and good. Let's continue. Now, in order to begin our JavaScript learning, I want us to be very familiar with a few concepts. Now, in particular, it's how events are run here. So, because like I said, I don't know if I said it already, but JavaScript is an event-driven program. So what happens is that the JavaScript will be idle in your browser until an event occurs. So the event can come from the user or from the computer. So for example, if I click a button here, that's an event. If there's a button here and I click it, that's an event. So for example, on our page right here, let's create some basic HTML. So I'm going to do that, and let's name it my drive. So this is just for us to see what's going on. So I can put a button here, for example, and say click me. So a button, this can be any element. It doesn't have to be a button, it can be a div, it doesn't matter. But I can tell JavaScript to respond to this by simply putting an event listener, because this thing can listen for a particular event. So if I wanted to listen for the click event on the button, I can simply go and say on click like this. Now, there are a lot of events you can listen for depending on the type of object. This one is a button, so of course it will have a click event. Now, for example, the window will have an on resize event, something like this, which this will never have. A button doesn't have this on resize event. This only works for the window because you can resize the window and it can listen for that resizing action and then respond to it. So in our case here, the on click, all I want to do is show an alert that I've been clicked. So this word alert is part of JavaScript. So within this event listener, whatever you add here is considered JavaScript and not HTML, is JavaScript. So here I can say an alert here and say you clicked me, like that. So let's test this. Oh, sorry, wrong page. Okay, so refresh, and there is our button there, right? So if I hit click, you see an alert here says you clicked me. Awesomeness, as simple as that. So we add an event listener there. So this is one way to add an event listener. Another way is to simply create some script tags here, and within these script tags, whatever we put in there is considered JavaScript. Okay, now we can put an alert here without the on click there. Let's just put an alert here. So even this is JavaScript. So now the problem here is that the moment I load the page, this JavaScript will run. So let's see it in action. So if I now refresh, you see it says you clicked me, even though I didn't click that button. So that's not good. We want it to run at a very specific time, meaning when we click this button, right? So how we do that is by creating a function. So we're just going to call this function clicked. You can call it anything you want, as long as it doesn't start with a number, that is. So we say the word function and then the name of the function, and then open and closing curly brackets to put all the code that we want. So we can put some space here, and then I'm going to move this code over there like so. Now this is inside a function. Now the advantage of a function, the reason we use functions is because we don't want the code to run immediately we load the page. So if you notice now, if I refresh the page, nothing runs because you have to actually call the function in order for it to run. So what I could do is grab this instead and put it in here. So that's how I call this function. So now when I click, instead of putting some code directly here, I'm going to say run this function. So whatever is inside here will be run. So in this case, that's the alert. So if I refresh and click here, look at that, you clicked me. So this is one way of adding an event listener to listen for a specific event. Now it's not only on the click, right? You can also say on mouse move, for example, on mouse down, when I click the mouse down, on mouse enter, on mouse leave, all these are things, on mouse move, on mouse out, on mouse over, mouse up. So you can test all of these events and see when exactly they fire. For example, on the mouse move event, if I do this, now I don't have to click the thing. As soon as I move the mouse over the button, it's going to alert me. So you just watch that, boom, there it is. You see, I didn't click that, I just hovered over it like this. So that's how you add events. Now the second way, this is one way to do it. This is the easiest way to add events, and I'm going to be using this one the most. A second way is by grabbing this button, okay, using document. Now we can give this button an ID so that it's easy to grab. So I'm going to say ID is equal to, I'm going to call it my button like that. So now I'm going to say document like this. Now everything in JavaScript is an object. So for example, this document, the word document represents the actual document here. There's also window, which represents the actual window. Now window is the parent of document. So it starts with window, and then inside window there's an item called document, and inside the item called document there's this element here, and then the rest go in there. There's the head, it has this. So whatever item here you put becomes part of the hierarchy. So from window, document, and then body, and then this button there, and so on. So now we want to document and look for some of the methods it has. So every object has methods depending on what it is. If it's an element, it's got things you can do with that element. So to find out its methods, you can just press dot like this. Now this won't give you proper suggestions. What I would suggest you do, if you want to know whatever things you can do after the dot here, try and run that in your browser. So in your browser, you can right click anywhere, just say inspect, and then go to where it says console. And here within the console, you can type something like document, right? And then once you put the dot like that, you have to click here on this little book. So it has a section here for you to type, and then it doesn't immediately run the code. So you see document there, and I do dot like that, and now it brings me everything that's possible in here. You see, so all of these document.body, for example, the body is inside the document, right? So you can do that. Document.bg color. So that's one of the properties in there. you can grab the background color. So for example, you can do something like document dot, there's a style in there, style sheet. Let's see, bg color is equal to, let's see, red. Let's try and run that. You see what has happened now? The background color has been changed to red by JavaScript once I run that. So this is literally how these things work. So refresh the page. So within every item, there's a dot something something. So certain things are properties, certain things are functions, right? So for example, this BG color is a property of the document. So now I've changed that property to red, and that's how you saw that thing be red. But there are other things like, for example, the query selector, like that. Now query selector performs an action. It's not a property, it's a function within document. So here we're going to say something like query selector. That's how we select items. Or you can use instead the get element by ID. Now keep in mind that we start with a small letter with all of these properties, and then with every new word we add a capital letter like this. So keep that in mind. Get element by ID. What element ID am I looking for? That's the ID I gave the button, so I'm going to put it there like so. Now because we want to do something with this button, we have to save it into a variable. So we're going to say let, we're going to call this my but, short for button. You can name this anything. This is just a variable. So now what we're doing, we're telling it to grab the button and put it in here. So now this is this button because we've grabbed it. Now we want to add an event listener to this button. So what we're going to do is we're going to say my_but.add event listener. So look at that, small letter, capital letter for every new word, like this. So that's how you add an event listener, but you tell it what event are you listening for. Now remember, here we had said on click, right? Like this. So we're listening for the click event. So here I'll do this and say click. You don't put the on, you only do that when you're adding it from here. So you just say the click event, right? And then you tell it what function you want to run. In this case, this function right there. So here I'm going to put the name of the function, which is clicked. So we add an event listener, which means now we're listening for the click event, and when that event happens, we're going to run this function called clicked. So let's see if this actually works. So if I click there, nothing works. So here there's an error, unquote error, and I've only seen it because I've opened the console. So argument 2 is not an object. Okay, so that's my bad. I have to remove the quotes from there, like so. It should be an object. Okay, so there we go. So let's refresh, and if I now click, you see it works exactly the same. So you see, this is one way. The second way of adding an event listener to this button. Now, of course, I prefer this one, where you just type on click like that. It's easier, right? But this one, sometimes you can't do all the time, because for example, maybe you don't know, let's say these buttons will be generated once the page has been loaded already, and then you're going to add new buttons while the page is already created. So those buttons, you don't know how they look like, what they'll have. So there's no way you can type something on those buttons that will be created in the future, right? So you can't always use this. This is why you can use this, because once you write the code to create a new button, then you can attach an event to that button right there because you can't do it like this. So depending on the situation, others prefer to do it like this. This is more verbose for me. It's more code to type. So I dislike using this. I only use this when I can't use that. Then I'll go this way. So either way is fine. None of these is better than the other. But for simplicity, we're going to go with this. So we don't need this ID anymore. We just need on the click, run that. So this is all well and good, right? So on click, I say run this clicked function. Don't forget the 2 brackets like so. So let's refresh. Boom, it works. Okay, good. Okay, so this is much simpler. Now, there's a concept called bubbling that I need you to understand. So here, bubbling is when you click, let's say I click on this. Now, what you don't see in the background is that this click event is taken to the parent of this. So I've clicked this button, but even the body is clicked. Even its parent, the parent of the body is the HTML tag is clicked, and then if the next one from here is the document and then the window. So they all get clicked. So I'm going to show you that in a moment. So that's called bubbling. So let me add a section here like so. It's called bubbling because it's like bubbles. You know, they start from the bottom of the container and then they bubble to the surface. I think that's why it's called bubbling. So let me put something like a form. I just want to put different items here so that we see what happens to the hierarchy in stages. So I have a div in there like so. Okay, so great. Now, from the perspective of the page, it doesn't look like anything has changed here, right? But now our button is within a div, but within a form, and then within a section, within a body. So I want to show you that once I click this, all of these guys get the click as well. So here, I'm going to do this. I'm going to add some code here and say on a click as well. It's the same event, right? I'm going to say this. Now this represents whatever item is this. So in here, this element is section. This element is form. So this in this context means the form. This means section. This means div, and so on. So I'm going to say this because this is an object, which means it has properties and functions I can use. I can do dot and then tell it what to do. So this item has a property called the tag name, which shows exactly what it is. For example, the tag name here is section. Here it's form, here it's div, here it's button. So I'm just going to write dot tag name like that. So we capitalize the second letter like this. So this dot tag name means this text here. Now I want to get the tag name so that we know which of these things were clicked. Is it the form, the section, the div, or the button, right? So in this case, I'll say this dot tag name. Now I want to alert, just like we did here. So I'm going to grab this alert part and put it here on each one of these like so. Then go to the end and close that. So all I want to do is so it can alert me the tag name of this very item here. So I'll grab this also and put it on the click of the button. Okay, so we are no longer running this function. We are just alerting which of these guys were clicked. Now I'm going to click the button, but you will realize that all of these guys will get clicked. So let's see that in action. So refresh and here so we can monitor any errors. So if I click, you see the button was clicked, obviously. But if I click OK, look at that. The div was clicked as well. If I click OK, the form gets a click. I click again, the section gets a click. But the rest of them didn't show. Like for example, the body, we didn't see it alert us to the body. Now the reason is because we don't have a capture like this one here. We're not capturing that event, so it's practically ignored. It happens, but in the background. So only when you capture it does it actually do something that you can actually see. So this is a very important concept to understand. Okay. Now the funny thing is, if I only add a click event here on the section here, right? Even if I click the button here, now remember, I click the button, an on-click event happens on this button, right? Then it bubbles up to the top. But wherever it finds an on-click, then it's going to show up. So let's do something to visualize this, right? So here I'm going to write the word section like that so that we can see the section. I'm going to write form, then I'm going to write div, and of course the button is click me. But let's add a few styles here so that these are actually visible, because here they'll just look like a bunch of text like this. But I want you to visualize them a little bit better. So I'm going to do style and say border, solid, thin. Let's add black. And then let's add some padding here, right? Padding 10 pixels. That way there's something going on there. Let's do that. Okay, much better. So now at least we can see what's happening. This is the div, this is the form, this is the section, right? Now if I click that, as always, all of them get an event. If I click section, I only get section, right? That's good. Now, the interesting thing is, if I remove all of these event listeners, let me start from here. All right. So no event listeners on all these, just at the top here. If I click the button in this case, so let me click the button, I get this section there. So the section was clicked, but I clicked here. Now the reason is simple. It's because once I click here, there's a click event happening in the background, even though I don't have a listener for it, but it's there. So once I click, the event does happen, but then it bubbles up to the top. And then when it gets to the section, it will find that the section has a capture system there to capture any click events. So since this same click event is bubbling up, when it gets here, it's actually captured and we can see it. Okay, so now for a second, I just want to move everything to the clicked function here so we can do a little more stuff. So I'm going to do this. Okay, so now let's come back, refresh, and I say click. You say you clicked me, right? Even though I clicked here. Now, regardless what I click within the section, it's going to react. Because of the same reason, the event is bubbling up to the top. Now, this is good because we can, instead of us adding events to each one of these items, we can just add it to the parent, for example. So we add the onClick listener to the parent, then whatever we click within it, we will be notified that there was a click. Now the only problem here is whichever thing we click here, we're just seeing the section, right? It just says you clicked me. Now, instead of using the this keyword, I'm going to use the event keyword. So event captures the actual event and whatever. Now the event is an object as well, so it's got properties and functions as well in there. So it's called event like this. So which means I'm sending it to whatever function I want to run. So I can capture it here. I can type event there like so, or I can simplify it here and just say E. You can't do that here because event is an actual keyword here in JavaScript. It means something. So you must type event here. But here, because you've already sent it, this is just a variable. So you can put E or you can put A or T. It doesn't really matter at this point, but we like using E because it's short for event. So it's just a variable. Any letter will do, or any word for that matter will do. So now E represents the event. Now instead of alerting us, we're going to do console.log instead, like this. So let's put that E in there. So this is console.log. Now console.log will send all the information to the console, which is here. So instead of giving us an alert, it will be pasted here. The console shows more information. So if I refresh the page and click now, we get a console.log. Did I save this? Yes, and it should show us the event, but it does not. So click again. Okay, that doesn't work, it seems. Console.log E. Clicked. Event E. Okay, that's weird. This is supposed to work. What is happening? Okay, so there it works. Okay, you see the reason why it's not working is because this button is inside a form. So every time I click it, it's actually refreshing the page because this is a form. So sorry about that. We can solve that by saying type is equal to button, like so. So we make it a normal button and not the submit button. So that'll work now. So if I click, you see now we have the event, and the name of the event is click. So you can see it says click there, which is the name of the event. And then the event has stuff in it because it's an object. So it's got things. Is it bubbling? Yes. So all these are properties, client X, client Y. So you can explore all these properties ready for you to use as you please. So we're going to use some of these things. So the one I want us to look at right now is the type of event is a click right there. The timestamp, when was it clicked? The target, very important. So look at the target here. This is what I want us to look at. The target is the section. It shows me that it's actually this section item that was clicked. Now let's refresh and click the button instead. So I'm going to view the click event one more time. And then let's look at the target. Now look at the target. It says it's the button, right? Now if I click the form, let me delete everything, click the form, and let's check the target again. The target is the form. So what I'm trying to show you here is that even though the event is on the main item here, right, we can still capture an event that was done here, and we can still know exactly what item was clicked by checking the word target, right? All right, so let's see that in action. So I'm going to do console.log, and then we're going to see e.target like that, .tag name, like so. Remember that e.target represents the element that was clicked, or the one that created the original event. So even though the event listener is here, this button, when I click it, it creates the event itself. So e.target represents that. And then the tag name of that item will be button in this case. So in this case, we can see exactly what was clicked inside the section, even though we only have one event list. So this is more efficient. So if I refresh now, if I click on the button, you see it says button there. Hopefully you can see it. If I click on the div, look at that. Click on the form, look at that. The section. Look at that. So it actually knows what we've clicked without us having to put event listeners on every single item. So that's the point I'm trying to make here. That's what bubbling does. Now, if you don't want the event to bubble, you can stop it at a very specific place. Like, for example, let's say I don't want it to reach here. I want it to stop right at the div here. So even on the button itself. So here I can do on click and say event.stop propagation. So there's a function inside the event object which is called stop propagation, and what it does is it's not going to allow the bubbling to continue above this very item. So you can see this by, if I do this and then click on it, you see nothing happens. I don't see anything in here. But if I click on the div, I do see the div there. Click on the button, nothing. So the propagation is stopped. The bubbling is stopped. That's how you stop the bubbling, like that. We won't be doing much of that, but certain times it's necessary to do. But if it's not necessary, never do this. Only do it when you need to, because bubbling is very important. Okay, so that's how you stop bubbling. Also, remember, form here, before we moved it to type is equal to button, it was refreshing the page, right? So let's see that in action again. If I refresh, click on form, I see everything else right here. But if I click on the button, it refreshes the page. As you can see, it's refreshing. You can see it there. Now, if you don't want that behavior, you can say the thing that's actually activating is the form. The form is the one that's causing this, because if I change this this submission will end as well. So if I click here, it will tell me that's a button several amounts of times, but it doesn't refresh. So the form is what refreshes the page. So what we can do is we can add an onSubmit event. There's an event called onSubmit. Okay, so we can say event.preventDefault. So this prevents the default action or whatever element is. If there's a default action, we're going to say event.preventDefault. Doing this, we've told the form not to react in the normal way, which means remain quiet, don't do anything, we'll tell you what to do instead. So refresh. Now click on the button, it doesn't submit anymore because the form is prohibited from doing that. So these are the main concepts I wanted you to grasp before we begin anything. So please rewatch this video several times until you understand, and also do some tests on your own on this code right here. Try it. Check some other events here as well. Like instead of on click, we can do the on mouse enter, for example. So mouse enter is when the mouse goes into an object, into the area of an object, and then we can tell it to react to show us which object we've entered right now. So if I refresh the page like this and just watch the screen over here, it says section. The moment I enter section, let me enter something else. Oh wait, it only shows this section. Oh, by the way, okay, so the problem with this particular event is that entering, you must leave before you enter. So once I enter, I can only enter the vicinity of this once. So there are some events that don't bubble, others do. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so do some tests and see what works and how it works, etc., etc. So you can have the on click. Let's try the on mouse move event. That one is better for this action. The mouse enter is because once you enter, for example, let's say we're in this section, we enter this. Let's try actually with mouse leave. So when you enter the container, it will trigger the mouse enter, and then when you leave with your mouse, it will trigger the mouse leave. So sometimes when these things are blended together, it's hard to tell what's entering and what's leaving what. So let's see if this reacts differently. So we left the section. So mouse enter and mouse leave don't bubble that well at all. As you can see here, it's just showing the section as being enter and leave, nothing else. But let's try the on mouse move event. Let's see how well that one bubbles. I see that one bubbles very well because you can see all kinds of things here: section, form, div, blah blah blah, etc., etc. So there's also the mouse down when you click, hold down, the mouse up when you release your mouse button, etc. to ensure that you can create all kinds of application. So with these events, we can create almost any application in here with ease. So this is the concepts. These are the basic concepts we're going to be using here. Listening for events and then manipulating the page because of those events. Okay, so hopefully this lesson wasn't too boring because it's more technical than practical. But I would encourage you to try this out while you're watching the video. Test these things, because once you test them, that's when you can really see what's going on. So test them and try them and do all kinds of things. And in the next video, we actually begin the coding of this page in particular. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.